Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast. This is Debbie, your host, and I'm really grateful that you're here again this week as we come together to be inspired as we hear and listen to another story of transition. You know, transitions are the stories of our lives, and we're always closing one chapter and opening another. So, my guest today, Ursula Taylor, at one time she was a nationally recognized managed care litigation attorney. Well, she transitioned and opened her new chapter of life when she closed her law practice and she started her own company called Conflict Reimagined. And she now supports organizations in efficiently avoiding or navigating internal and external disputes. So, whether it's a personal conflict you're experiencing or you're in a corporate setting, she's going to bring understanding to the real sources of conflict and will help you facilitate a more efficient and effective path for conflict resolution. Well, Ursula, welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, this is a topic that is, I think, so important for all of us to learn. And just to have someone like you that has the wisdom, the knowledge to really teach us about it is so important, because transitions, even in life, will come with conflict. When there's change, whenever we have to do something different, we can find ourselves in conflict. So conflict just seems to be a part of life. And so if we can navigate it better, I'm thrilled and I'm excited to hear what it is that you're going to share with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so you left the corporate world, and of course, I love the name of your company, Conflict Reimagined. So,
Mhm.
just briefly share with us what took you from that chapter into the next one.
Yeah, sure. I think, there's some common thread throughout. And I love what you were just sharing because life is a journey and nothing's wasted. And the
Right.
leaving and the something new, it's just a build, right? My skills as a lawyer and a litigator still serve me. And the experience I've had and what I've learned serves me in a number of ways. But I think I went to law school because I think I never really liked conflict and wanted to do it better. And I think there's like this false sense that I had, and I think others have, that if you put on a fancy suit and speak with big words and do it in this seemingly elevated setting with lawyers and judges and educated people, then we're really dealing with conflict in the right ways, right? We got fancy and smart, right? So we're so fancy and so smart.
No,
So
we're not.
really, we're elevated, right? And then what I came to learn through my journey, I went from a large law firm to a boutique law firm to a smaller law firm and ultimately my own law firm. And what I came to learn through that is, of course, the skill sets for being a lawyer, but more fundamentally that like all conflict is human emotion. It always comes from human emotion. It doesn't matter how fancy you are, it doesn't matter how big your words are. It doesn't matter if you're a managed care entity fighting with a healthcare provider. I mean, at its root are humans and human emotion. And I think what's missing from law and legal practice right now is a lack of honoring that. I mean, I think aspects of family law, they're starting to understand it. Um, but more broadly and generally, law and legal systems are about avoiding and repressing emotion. And the way to
Mm.
contend with emotion as the drivers of conflict is not to pretend that they're not there or that we're above it, but to honor it in a way that allows us to release it. And when we do that, we can access something that's more clear, more grounded. We can find the strategic solutions that the lawyers are talking about. We can implement the negotiation strategies that so many authors write about. But you really can't do that effectively until you've dealt with your own human emotion. And if you're in a conflict, approaching a conflict, navigating a tension, whatever you want to call it, there is something for you in that. There's a thread for you in terms of your own emotional driver.
So, what I believe I hear you're saying, it's good for us to look at ourselves as to what the conflict has done to us. maybe
Yeah.
to cause us to react instead of respond.
Yeah, yeah, there's something for us. Even if we're not reactive, even if we don't get animated, even if we don't use big words, there's something for us. And it's in unraveling that we find our clarity. So in other words, resolving a conflict or getting what we want from a negotiation or a tension with another party is an inward out process, not an outward in process. We still have the external strategies in terms of negotiation or litigation or whatever it may be, but you're not effective in that when you are still clouded with your own emotional charge. And every conflict has emotional charge. So find it, feel it, release it to become the most powerful version of yourself, to navigate your dispute, to resolve your dispute, to get back to what you're here to do in terms of your business goal or function or your individual goals or functions.
I'm so glad that you shared that because one of the things that I'd love to talk to women about in times of transition, if you're have an offense inside of you and you're being maybe promoted to go into something new and different, you have opportunity in front of you, but if you have an offense inside of you towards someone or something, you may not go into that next step just because of that internal conflict, which to
Right,
me, the offense is a conflict that has not been resolved.
right, right. And it's really important to I mean, I think one founding sort of thing, sort of encompassing thing that keeps us stuck is blame and fault. And
Mm.
what I like to say to people, whether I'm working with someone who is in a dispute, approaching a dispute, or if I'm just working with a team and like basic team building or leadership development, is I don't see blame and fault. I mean, you can vent in a space of blame and fault, but I see fear and feelings. So blame and fault is an illusion. It's something that keeps us stuck. And when we have to exist in that space of, well, that person's at fault and I'm less at fault and they're more at fault and let's figure out fault. Nobody's in the business of blame and fault.
Mm.
Nobody drives their bottom line from being right or making someone wrong. Nobody feels that their individual sole purpose or like gift is to like make that guy wrong and be right. If you're in that, you're perpetually in that, you have some things to heal. And that's okay. Like we all have things to heal. That's
Yes.
right. There's opportunity when we see our own displays of righteousness. There's opportunity in that because then we can unravel it and become the more powerful version of ourselves in that.
Yes, I totally agree. So, why is it then? Because you just kind of described a person, well, maybe in their type of their style of conflict, like you said, well, the only way they're going to come out of this is if they're right and,
Hmm.
manipulate the whole thing in their favor. So that's not a
Hmm.
healthy way to,
Hmm.
resolve our conflict. But for the person who knows there is something wrong, but they want to avoid the conflict, what are the consequences of never really stepping in to address it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're avoiding conflict, then there's some fear or fear-based emotion. Um, I kind of think of human emotion as sitting on a spectrum, and on one end is like guilt and shame and pride and scarcity and all the fear, and then there's sort of neutrality in the middle, and then you have courage and hope and more love-oriented emotion, more expansive emotions on the other side. And if we're operating from fear, and fear of conflict is fear, right? Fear of
Hmm.
conflict or seeking to avoid conflict. That is a derivation of fear. And that's a signal, that's a pathway, that's a call, that's a flashing red light to stop and sit with that. And I think what we often do is two different things. Sometimes we come close because we say it out loud. Well, sometimes we just avoid and we don't say what our fear is and we just stay away and we don't ever have that awareness. Sometimes we come close and we have the awareness and we say, I don't like conflict. I'm not good at conflict. And then we shut it down and like exit
Hmm.
out. That's not safe, so I don't do it. I'm a no conflict. Sorry, don't do it. But that's an excuse and that's an energizing and sort of of your fear. That's sort of giving it space instead of
Yeah.
You want to go into it and say, okay, I hold fear here. Great first step. But then sit in it. Okay, let's really go there. What's the worst that can happen? Let's feel what that is. Let's feel the energy of it. Like without the story and the drama, without the he said, she said, but just in your body. And that's a strategy for then releasing some of that charge, releasing some of that fear. And then you grow a little bit more courage and you say, well, I really can't not deal with this, right?
Mhm.
I'm not the fully aligned, embodied version of myself if I'm not saying, right? Perpetually avoiding and living in fear of conflict, it can lead to depression or anxiety because the thing is, emotion's energy, because everything's
Right.
energy. And when we don't feel it and release it, it doesn't, it just stays in there, it just stays stuck. So when we're thinking about conflict and fear of conflict, it's all kind of some fear-based emotion, and it's okay, but it is a call to sit with it and release it.
That is so good because as you were sharing that, I remember a time in my life I did not like conflict. And I had to come to grips with the fact that I just wanted peace, but
Hmm.
I was willing to sacrifice myself for the peace and never resolve the conflict.
Hmm.
And you used the word grow. Like I had
Hmm.
to grow to learn how to step into that space and realize I do have a voice. I can share my opinion, but learn how to do it where I'm not aggressive, where I'm not accusing, but somehow learn to share it that I can be heard. Because I think,
Right.
isn't that the bottom line in conflict?
Yes.
Everybody wants to be heard and understood.
Yes, yes. And we don't always get that back from the other person. But
Right.
it's interesting what you said. I wanted peace, but we sacrifice the peace within ourselves.
Yes, that's what I
We're not
did.
achieving peace because there's no peace here. And if there's no peace here in yourself, you're not going to create peace outwardly.
That's
Um,
so
and
true.
and
So
and
true.
yeah, self-sacrificing and self-denial. And look, I've lived it. I have lived that. I've been close with people who really can't deal with our expressions of or our boundaries. Boundaries are really important. They're not accepted or affirmed. And but when we're really strong with ourselves, when we really know, when we have a strong inner compass because we're doing this work, um, we can just have compassion for whatever their reaction is because that's their stuff.
Mm,
And oftentimes sort of our articulated boundary or our articulated need, whatever it is that maybe ruffles their feathers, is something they needed, right? It didn't feel good, but it's something they needed to see themselves, right?
true.
So it can be a gift and it might be uncomfortable, but growth comes from uncomfortability. Growth comes from sitting in the uncomfortability. So that's how I see conflict as opportunity. Because if you use it and have that perspective and are conscious and self-aware, you actually get opportunities for growth when you find these threads of fear-based emotion, essentially.
Yes, and you touched on something really powerful there. We're actually preventing the other person from growing, ourselves from growing, because maybe they need to understand more. And so it's
Hmm.
all about us growing and learning to
Hmm.
honor more, to respect more, but we won't understand that unless we're challenged with the truth,
Right,
right?
right,
So
right.
what do you do, Ursula, when you want to have that negotiation, you want to have that conversation, but the other person is not willing? What
Mm.
is your advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, you could get to a point and realize that the other person is not willing. I mean, the first part is that conversation with yourself, completely grounded and clear. We've released what emotional charge that we can find, and then you have your engagement with the other side, and there's lots of strategies for making that effective. You essentially want to create what feels psychologically safe to them, so they can
Mhm.
begin to see themselves a little bit, to feel heard and start to feel safe. And when they feel heard, and when they feel safe, and when they feel trusted, walls can come down and they can begin to see themselves. But to your point, sometimes you're dealing with someone whose walls are thick and they're up there
Yeah.
and they can't and they won't. And it's not, and you're not going to get what you want. If you are done the work yourself and you are grounded and clear and neutral and you know what you need, you also know what you can control, what you cannot control, what you have to surrender, and you
Yeah.
can have plan A, B, and C, and you can move through your own fear, and you can get to a level of acceptance. You can answer the question, what do I need? And you can clearly see where you have real leverage, where you don't, what's in your control, what's not, and you can navigate it with more ease. Even if you don't get exactly what you want, you can identify and get clarity on the alternative strategies and the alternative outcomes and come to terms with it.
That's good. You're reminding me of this quote I have here. 10% of conflict is due to a difference in opinion. 90% is due to the delivery and the tone.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think if we start off assertive or aggressive, it kind of shuts the garage door, doesn't it?
It does. It shuts the garage door because it's all energy and energy is contagious. So when you come in aggressive, that's an expression of fear and you trigger that in the other side and everybody gets
Hmm.
defensive and walled up. And there's this misconception that if you come in softer, that you're less powerful. It's not
Mm.
true. You're more powerful. Your vulnerability is power. When you're rock solid on who you are and what you need because you've had that conversation with yourself, another person's reactions don't take away from that, right? When we've done the inner work and we're clear, somebody else's reaction is just somebody else's reaction. And your discernment, you can develop better discernment so you can see what's authentic from them and what's kind of junk. And there's a lot of junk, right?
Right.
But there's a lot more room than we think to find solutions together when everybody is grounded and clear
Hmm.
and operating as their authentic full selves. When people are walled and defensive, that means there's fear. But if you're coming in without that fear, you actually take away the possibility that they're going to bring that. You don't have it and you're not participatory in it. It's just not gonna perpetuate in the same ways that would perpetuate a protracted dispute that I would experience and see in a litigation, for instance.
Hmm. And they're the tough ones where you have to get in there and mediate. And especially in the business world, the corporate world, it has got to be tough, especially if like a
Yeah.
leader has not developed that culture of conflict resolution in the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, and it's interesting you used the word mediation, and people will ask me, "Are you a mediator?" And in some sense, yes, and in some sense, no. And the reason I hesitate to use that descriptor is that I feel that traditionally mediation has been, at least in my experience, and this isn't always so, but in my
Mhm.
experience as a commercial litigator, what's happening in a mediation oftentimes is just the creation of a countervailing fear. So you have the fear that got you into the dispute, your pride, your scarcity, um, that fueled that righteousness or whatever it is
Right.
in the dispute. But then what mediators are often doing, in my experience as a lawyer, is coming in and saying, okay, but this is how much this is going to cost. And do you know that you could
Yeah.
lose? And they start creating a fear. And it's like, that's okay. There's some value in that, but you're getting a ceasefire and you're not able to get people to start really having that fear of the outcome or the cost unless and until there's been a certain amount of bloodshed. You right? Like
Right.
you
Right.
gotta have the
Yeah.
bloodshed.
And it's going to cost you.
Yeah. It's like in a war or on a battleground, the medic coming in and picking up the injured soldiers. It's like, that's great. That's valuable. We want to pick up the injured soldiers, but there had to be a war and there had to be a battle and there had to be bloodshed.
Hmm.
And what I'm suggesting is that there's a way to deal with the fear itself, unravel it in one side, which has a domino effect on the other, and we get more efficient, more sustaining outcomes than just coming in and saying, well, you could lose. You know?
Yeah. Well, how do you get people to acknowledge their fears?
Yeah.
What tools do you use to, help people understand where they're coming from? Maybe what's getting in the way, their
Yeah,
emotions.
yeah, yeah. And like the first thing I would say is it's not for everyone. And I like to talk about the business case because I think that that's really practical way to look at it. As
Mm-hmm.
I was mentioning earlier, nobody's in the business of being right and making other people wrong. That's not what drives profits.
Right.
Like, look at all these litigations I won last year. Like, we're really doing great. You know?
Right. That's not
No,
your
like,
measure.
no. And what I say quite candidly is I've never done a litigation budget for less than a $500,000 through trial.
Wow.
Not for less than a 500,000, not a real one. And there's like
Hmm.
a list of assumptions in terms of what happens with your opponent and the judge and this and that and how much discovery is allowed. And so the business case is easy. If you are in the business of something other than being right and making someone wrong, if you want something more for yourself, then you should think about how to more efficiently navigate conflict and call me before you call a lawyer.
That's
Practicing
true.
litigation attorney. Um, but then getting back to your question is how do you've got the business case, right? How do you get people to acknowledge and see their fear? And I think more and more people are open and willing to do this. More and more people are sort of on like a wellness healing journey where they want to be well and they want to be whole. And
Right.
so much of what I talk about is sort of known and understood in healing and wellness and mental health. And so I'm generally dealing with people who are at least in that sort of spectrum of thought, right? They've got some
Mhm.
concept of like, I have limitations. As I release these limitations, I do better at life. Right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's typically my audience. And then and once you've got the right people, dealing with the right people, because those are the people who call me, to be quite candid. Then it's really about creating safety and trust. I have to be really self-aware. I have to be really grounded and clear if I'm going to try to hold space for someone to find their fear. And that can take more than one meeting. That can take a few meetings. That can take a little while. That can take some conferences within groups and teams. And it's a customized approach that I apply. It's unique to every individual and organization and group, but at its core is allowing people to feel safe to note themselves, right?
Mm.
And I'm facilitating and I'm creating space and I'm creating the right energy and laying the ground rules and getting buy-in about what we're trying to do. And from there, you can usually get some movement, and it might take time.
Well, I can understand that because trust takes time to develop. It
It does.
really does. And
It does.
it's a gift when someone gives you their trust. So I'm sure you must really feel great when you get to that place with a client because then you know how much further you can take them
Right,
once you have that trust.
right,
So,
right.
one of the things too that I will talk to women about is sometimes they don't understand why they are in conflict or why certain things are bothering them. And I always go to their core values and I always say, what are your core values? And then they'll list them. Sometimes they have to think about them. To my point, I don't think a lot of people understand all of their core values because if you understand them, then you can understand why that situation conflicted with you because it goes against your core values.
Mm, mm,
And I think that's how a lot of conflict gets triggered because our values are important to us.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so, do you ever find that in the midst of your
mm-hmm.
negotiations and navigations that it comes
Yeah.
down to core value differences?
Yeah, it does. Yes. And I like the idea of coming back to your core values because it's really prompting people to come back to themselves. What are your
Yes.
core values? You know, and sometimes you mentioned it's hard for people to come to that. Well, where do you feel at your highest and best? You know, where do you feel
Mhm.
good? Where's your safe space? What puts a smile on your face? Like you can even get more basic than that, but it brings people back to themselves. And in terms of the other person violating your core values, I think that the thing to be careful of there is jumping to assumptions. Like we don't really know what they think or why they did what they did or what's animating them. We
Mhm.
never know. It's not up to us to know. We don't need to know. What we need to know is what are our core values and then what are our boundaries? What is it? Where is it? Where are we at a point where it's like, okay, to not articulate this or to not demand this would be us not being at peace with ourselves, would be a self-denial. It would be out of alignment. It would be not loving ourselves. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
at what point that's your boundary? I'm sorry. And I think boundaries, they don't need to be this electric fence that like, "Ah, that's my
Yeah.
boundary." You just be like, no, thank you. You know, it's like, no, I can't do that. You know?
Like a dog collar.
Yeah, yeah. I think the most powerfully articulated boundaries is just when we're so certain and we know it so strongly that we don't need to be that electric fence. We're just like, no, I can't do that. Thank you, but no, that's not
That's
going to work for
good.
me. You know, and that comes from within. That comes from a solidity within. And those boundaries are so important. But we don't have to jump to that person has violated my core values. You can just keep it at boundary because who knows? And the other thing that I think is so important is remembering that we're always shifting and that we're always changing. I'm not the same person I was yesterday. I'm not the same person I was a week ago. And so if we're really wanting to see growth in that other person, whether that's a coworker or a family member or a spouse or partner of some kind, if we really want to see that, we have to believe that that boundary you articulated, it's going to land. Today's a new day. You know, we don't have to say, well, they did that yesterday, so they're a narcissist and they're this and they're evil and they're don't have strong values or that like that was yesterday. We can create
Right.
room while still having our boundaries intact. We can create room for their growth too. Because if we're really getting what we want, everybody's shifting, every day is new, and we don't have to stick to judgments and assumptions about what was.
Oh, that's so powerful because we can hold someone hostage in our mind about how they reacted 2 months ago. And then we just assume they are going to be the same way
Right,
when if they have that space to evolve into a better
right,
form of themselves. And we may not know it until we have another engagement with them. So,
right.
yeah, that's really good. If we go in with the assumption they're going to respond that way, we've already set up a wall
Yeah.
in conflict.
We've set up a wall. The thing that we need to be solid on is us, our value, who we are, you know, who you are yourself, and your value and your boundary. So, you know, but we don't, if we presume, if we assume, oh, that person's a thief, they've always been a thief, they're going to show up as a thief, then we just create that energy. And guess how they're going to show up? They're going to feel that, right? So,
Yeah, that is
yeah.
such good advice. I can learn a lot for that myself. That is so good. So bottom line, whether you're in personal conflict or corporate conflict, it's the same because we all have emotions.
Right, right. It's fear. It's just fear and the emotional derivations of fear, right? Fear-based emotion. It's energy. It's always energy, and our energy is contagious. So we're holding that within us. We're not effective in a negotiation. We're not effective in a dispute. We're not effective in doing anything except perpetuating that. Unless we get met with someone who's really grounded and clear, and then maybe they can help us resolve it. But you know, you can't wait for that and hope for that. You have to just be you. So. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take it to a personal level here. And I was reading some of your blogs and some of the information on your website. And I would love for you to tell us the pickleball story.
The pickleball story.
Because I read
Yeah,
that and I said, that is real life. That's every day.
yeah,
We can all
yeah,
find ourselves in that story. So would you
yeah,
mind sharing
yeah.
that?
The pickleball story. I was conceiving of this consultancy and growing out the foundation of this practice and just writing a lot. And I was writing about my life and I was a volunteer coach for kids track and field. And the gist of the story is that I got heated and mad, but I noted it. It wasn't wasted. It was utilized. It was opportunity. And I'm coaching these kids. It was a couple years ago. We're in the park and somebody came up and kind of can't remember. We'd always used this space in the park. It always been space that we'd use for our kids to practice. And somebody was there and playing pickleball. And we're like, hey, we have elementary school track and field practice here. And he's like, I'm here. And he just like refused to move, like 50 school children,
Oh
so
my
that one
gosh.
person could play a pickleball game. And it's like, yeah, well, at that point, it wasn't a dedicated pickleball court. It's like, well, we really use the surface, and most of the time we can work it out, but the other coach got heated, and then a part goer, like a random woman, got in my face and said, "You're not allowed to be." And it's like, these are public school children. And I got really upset because it's like, what the, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
These are public school kids doing an extracurricular activity. Are we really going to push the entire track practice so one man can play pickleball? And just the fact that she was sort of waved her finger at me. And yeah, I had to really sit with that and I had to really go into that and I had to really unravel that because I noted myself. So it's
Hmm.
okay when we get really big and really animated if we're like, whoa, I really saw red. I really got upset. And it was, I think it was, and I have to go back to my article, but I think it's like an underlying feeling of unworthiness, right? I wasn't
Hmm.
really grounded and clear. Like if I'd been really grounded and clear and just been like, when we're having, track practice for 50 public school children, are you saying that that's not the priority? Maybe I could have had like more of an effective dialogue with her. But I think it's a lack of grounded clarity and knowing on she just triggered my stuff. But I was able to sit with it. I was able to like release some of that. And I mean, I haven't gotten in any fights in the park, since then. Maybe I
Good
made some
girl.
progress, I don't know.
But you know what? I love that. And I do that myself. Like when I feel something in my heart that's off, it's like, wait a minute, why is that there? Why
Hmm.
is that there? And
It's
I'll
there to be
just sit on
felt.
my couch and I'll go, okay, Lord, why is that there?
Hmm.
And there's always a reason. There's a root and a reason behind the way we act, feel, and
Hmm.
behave. And I love that you said, wait a minute, I got angrier than I should have. Maybe the root of it is unworthiness. So why is
Hmm.
that there? And then begin to really
Right,
dig into that. That is so
right,
healthy. I think
right.
that
And
is
it
so healthy.
it releases and it creates the capacity for more clarity, right? More
Yes,
like you can think strategically about problems and solutions and it's okay that we get emotionally charged. When we act from it, we're generally not acting in the highest and best way in
right.
terms of finding solutions and resolving disputes.
I totally agree. So, how would you describe healthy conflict?
I think healthy conflict is conflict that comes with consciousness. Consciousness on at least one party, which then can be contagious and infect the other party. Healthy conflict is when we're willing to say, okay, what's charged for me?
Hmm.
Because I bet we could all sit there and think about a situation when somebody did something egregious. Somebody did something that was below the belt, but you were able to just say, and sort of maybe roll your eyes or not even roll your eyes. Maybe you just sort of breathe and cock your head and look at that person and say, that looks hard. That person's in pain, right? And then maybe you've had an experience where another person, a friend of yours, a neighbor, or somebody else, or maybe a spouse experienced the same thing and they got fired up, right? They got upset, but you stay grounded. It didn't affect you. And what that shows us is that conflict and the emotions that come from conflict are personal and individuated. So, healthy conflict is when we can get conscious and self-aware and clear when we're triggered and sit with it and sit in the uncomfortability and release that within ourselves, separate and apart, and before engaging, taking action, or having words with our counterpart.
That's really good. That's really good. I love that. I would love your thoughts on this quote. If we manage conflict constructively, we harness its energy for creativity and development.
Exactly right, right. When we harness conflict effectively, we use it as a signal and a pathway to find the thread in us that's limiting us from more expansive creativity and innovation. So we are not innovative and creative when we are small and contracted, when we are in a conflict situation. We can't see the horizon, we can't see the possibilities because we're just down so low. And you can think of it as sort of like the two sides of your brain. There's the fight or flight side of left side of your brain. There's the expansive, creative right side of our brain. And we have to get out of this into the other. How do we get out of this? we feel it, we sit in it, not the story, not the drama, because that just deepens the groove.
Yes,
We feel the energy, we can release it and
that is
set that
so beautiful.
intention. And if you have a religious, foundation to yourself, you can ask, Jesus or Lord or whoever you find that solace in, whatever that is, if it's religion or spirituality or nature or your pet, whatever that is, just yeah, looking to something beyond your ego self can help.
And that's a classic description of being stuck, right? If we
Hmm.
can't resolve conflict, we can remain stuck emotionally in some areas. And it does. We have this creativity that won't flow. Yeah,
Hmm.
you just gave a beautiful visual picture of that. I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah,
And so basically, you work with corporations, you have
yeah.
workshops and trainings to help business leaders.
Yeah, yeah, everything's customized. I work with individuals who are contemplating litigation or approaching litigation or have a dispute or a tension point and want to talk to someone before they call the litigation attorney or contemporaneous with the litigation attorney. Or I just work with organizations and teams and leaders who are maybe at an inflection point or see themselves just sort of a little bit limited by reoccurring tensions and misunderstandings. And I can help organizations navigate through that. Or maybe it's a business leader who's sort of lived through the consequences of ineffectively dealing with conflict, maybe a partnership
Mhm.
that didn't work out or a team that just couldn't thrive. I can kind of come in there and be a preventative support through that as an organization grows or develops.
That's great. And for the audience who's listening, I'm going to have all of Ursula's contact information in my show notes. But Ursula, why don't you just tell everyone what's the best way to reach out and connect with you?
Sure, find me on my website and submit an inquiry. It's conflictreimagined.com, www.conflictreimagined.com. Shoot me a note. Happy to chat with people and do a free consultation to just chat about how I could help you or what I see. I can usually get some nuggets that are helpful just in an initial call sometimes. So yeah, if you're open and you want to prioritize your business goals and functions or your individual goals and functions above conflict, or you understand the cost and uncertainty and you want to see if there's a different way, please reach out. I'd be happy to support and help.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, in closing, just thinking there's someone who's listening right now that's in the throes of conflict and they're not maybe feeling real good about what's going on. Do you have any final words that you'd love to share about what you do? And what would you say to that person right now?
I would say slow down, take a breath, let go of the need to solve it all now. Let it come to you slowly. And I think that like lawyers, especially, or people who are highly intellectualized, that can be a gift, but it can also be a detriment because we want to solve it with our intellectual mind. And the reality is, when we can like let go of that a little bit, it comes through us, right? Most of
Mhm.
us get to a place in life where we've got enough of the experience and the skill sets. We're not lacking a know-how. We're not lacking a procedural manual or a how to do. Um, we're just not giving ourselves the space to let the answer come to us. So slow down, let yourself feel what's coming up and just trust. Just let go of the need to control it so tightly.
That is great advice. And so I just want to thank you, Ursula, for being here with us today. Such profound wisdom and knowledge, and a whole nother way to look at conflict and how it affects us emotionally. And as a result of our emotions, we can either perpetuate conflict or we can bring resolution. And
That's
so
exactly right. Thank you.
thank you for sharing. Gosh, I've taken a lot of notes. I've learned a lot from you today.
It's
And to
wonderful.
my audience, I just want to say thank you for coming in. And there's a quote from Max Lucado: conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. And so if you find yourself, we all get in these places because it's just part of life. Remember, it's inevitable. You're going to come across some kind of situation or a loved one, and you're going to have some conflict. But don't choose the option of a battle. I would highly recommend you reach out to Ursula because you can hear she has a lot of wisdom. She understands, and she's going to help you get to the root of it. She's going to teach you healthy ways to navigate conflict and bring a resolution. So, again, Ursula, thank you for being here with us today. And to the Transition Tribe, remember there's always a purpose and a power in the transitions of life.
Thank you.